Good evening, Senator Sanders. The coronavirus has quickly become a public health threat with a global reach, and infection and death rates are rising here in the United States. What is your assessment of the Trump administration's handling of the outbreak, and what would you do differently?
Good. So, first of all, this is what I would do. You need scientists leading the effort, not politicians. This cannot be in any way, shape, or form perceived to be a political issue. Number two, we will talk, I am sure, about Medicare for all. Yes, but when I talk about health care being a human right and all people having health care, the coronavirus crisis makes that abundantly clear as to why it should be. You got millions of people in this country today who may feel that they have a symptom, but you know what? They cannot afford to go to a doctor. And then they're going to go to work. We have a president of the United States, doesn't matter, go to work. We have a president who says absurd things. So what we need to do is right now make it clear that all Americans, if you are feeling sick, go to a doctor. It will be paid for. Don't hesitate to go to the doctor.
Sanders, to Marty's point, to Marty's question about what you would do differently, standing around the president right now are a lot of scientists, Dr. Tony Fauci, and the head of the CDC, a lot of experts. Would you not have those experts?
Of course I would.
Well, what would you do differently to his point?
But here is the point. I would not be a president saying to the world, oh, by the way, was he on Fox saying this, right? I have a natural ability to understand the problem. Is that true or not?
Sure, I think he did say that, yeah.
All right. He doesn't have a natural ability. That's not what the scientists
Okay, well, let's talk about the economy. The market's dropped.
What, we're not talking about coronavirus anymore?
We are. This is to deal with coronavirus. The market's dropped 2,000 points.
I always give this guy a hard side,
You do, but
because I remind him he's on Fox television. He forgot about it, but I wanted to remind him.
We'll be fair. The market's dropped more than 2,000 points today based on the virus. Airlines, cruise lines, hospitality industry obviously taking a big hit. What if those companies needed a bailout to stay afloat and avoid losing thousands of jobs? As president, how would you handle requests by American companies for a bailout?
So my answer right now is we will take a look at the economy. Obviously, we don't want the economy to tank. But when three people in America, Brett and Martha, own more wealth than the bottom half of this country, when 49% of all new income goes to the top 1%, when we have more income and wealth inequality than any time in the last 100 years, if we need to bail out the economy, you know who does it? The people on top, not working class people who are struggling today.
The first one is you've talked about raising taxes on corporations, raising taxes on Americans to some extent as well. Would you, if you were in the Oval Office today, given what's going on in the economy right now, concerns that perhaps there might be a recession coming, as some people suspect could happen as a result of all this, would you hold off on raising taxes while that situation is going on?
Well, so I think one thing you do with progressive taxation is you say to the wealthiest people in this country whose wealth is exploding, while we have 500,000 people sleeping out on the streets, including 30,000 veterans, where we have kids who cannot afford to go to college, we're going to ask the wealthiest people in the country to pay their fair share.
With respect, can I just but I'm asking you, in the middle of right now, when we are potentially in an economic crisis, you've got all these companies that are halting conferences and cruise ships and all these things. Would you say, but you know what? I still believe that in this moment we need to raise taxes.
So what I would do is invest in working class people in good paying jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, roads, bridges. I don't have to tell the people of Michigan who have lived through Flint, Michigan, about a horrible water system.
All right, but there are good things that billionaires do in a time of crisis, right?
But don't you think it's a bit absurd that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we have to depend upon the generosity of billionaires to help us? We should be.
Hi, Senator Sanders. So to some people, you're seen as too liberal. It seems like you have the right ideas, but to most moderate Democrats, it seems like Joe Biden could get more accomplished in office. So how will you ensure that you can accomplish all of your goals in office and leave the country in a better place after 4 years?
Thanks, Allison. I reject the idea. I really do. That's one of the things that bothers me. I hear it every day. I hear it on the media. I hear it from my opponents. Bernie is an extremist. Bernie is too radical. Okay, let's deal with it. Is raising a starvation minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, which has not been raised in 10 years, to $15 an hour, a living wage, a radical idea? No. Is making public colleges and universities tuition-free so that all of our people have the opportunity to get a higher education in a competitive global economy. Is that a radical idea? No. Is doing what every other major country on earth does, guaranteeing health care to all as a right. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. This is not a communist society up there in Montreal. They guarantee health care to all. They spend 50% of what we spend. Is passing a Medicare for all single-payer system a radical idea? No! And last point, Donald Trump, I know he's on the network a whole lot. Donald, you're probably watching. How are you? All right, I know. I'm sure he's watching Fox on the side there. You know, he's kind of addicted to your station. Trump thinks that climate change is a hoax. And that's because he doesn't understand or respect science. I believe that climate change is an existential threat to this planet. I will listen to the scientists who tell us that we have got to move aggressively to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And through a Green New Deal, by the way, we can create up to 20 million good-paying jobs. So my point is, I appreciate Allison raising the question. I just don't think any of those ideas are radical.
Bernie just drove me crazy. He was in Congress for years. He had one senator support him. Nobody likes him. Nobody wants to work with him. He got nothing done. He was a career politician. He did not work till he was like 41, and then he got elected to something. It was all just baloney, and I feel so bad that, you know, people got sucked into it.
Wow, that's strong stuff. What's your reaction?
Unlike Secretary Clinton, I don't want to relive 2016. We're in 2020 now. On a good day, my wife likes me. But also, if you guys look at some of the polling that they do for United States senators, you know, they do polls, how popular you are. In most cases, I turn out to be the most popular United States senator in the whole country. So, one or two people most likely.
Senator, President Trump continues to tweet. He continues to tweet even today that the Democratic primary race is rigged against you. He said the same thing in 2016. So do you agree with President Trump?
Look, Trump has his agenda, and I have the feeling that deep in his heart, he's really not all that worried about me. I appreciate his concerns. You will forgive me if I don't necessarily trust him or believe him. But I will say this. He has some very smart political consultants around him. And a couple of weeks ago, a political consultant, somebody asked him, well, who would you rather run against, Sanders or Trump or whatever? And what the guy said, I forgot his name, he said, you know what? Running against a movement makes me nervous. Because they understand that our campaign is more than just a campaign. We are creating a multiracial, multi-generational political movement of young people, of working people, of people who believe in justice all across this country. And in his heart of hearts, I think that is what makes Trump very nervous.
Senator Sanders, if you were met with an obstructionist Congress, what compromises would you be willing to make to still promote your chief policies?
I worked with the late John McCain, who was a friend of mine. We had different points of view, but I respected John immensely. John and I worked together when I was chairman of the U.S. Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs on perhaps the most comprehensive veterans bill passed in modern history. So the idea that I cannot work with Republicans on issues where we can come together is just not accurate.
All right, so a lot of the questions that deal with, hold on, if entirely covered by taxes, it would be nearly double the existing level of taxes. If entirely covered by borrowing, it would soar the national debt to $78 trillion. Now, the national debt is $23 trillion right now and counting. So how can you pay for all this?
Medicare for all. How are you going to pay for Medicare for all? Fair question. How are we paying for it right now? We're paying for it right now by spending twice as much per person as the people of any other country. The average family in America makes approximately $60,000 a year. They are paying $12,000 a year, 20% of the income for health care. Their employer is paying even more. So what I propose is instead of you, an average worker, paying $12,000 a year, what we are going to do is eliminate all premiums. And now let's be fair about this. Sometimes we're not fair on television. All right? Premiums are gone. Got it? No one's paying any more premiums. No one's paying any more co-payments on the Medicare for All. The absurd concept of a deductible is gone. All right? We have proposed a 4% income tax on you, exempting the first $29,000. So people making $29,000 or $1,000 or less don't pay anything. But that would mean that you would pay 4% of $31,000. That's $1,200 a year. You know what, guys? Comprehensive health care under my Medicare for All plan, by the way, that includes dental care, hearing aids, eyeglasses, and home health care. $1,200 a year is a pretty good deal, it seems to me. So to answer your question, right now the federal government, through Medicaid, Medicare, and other public health programs, we're spending about $30 billion a year. We think you'll need about $47 billion to fund what I want to fund. That's $17 billion more, and it comes through the mechanisms that I talked about. If right now you're the average worker, okay, you're paying $12,000 a year for health care. And if I said to that worker that I can provide better health care for substantially less, but you'll have to pay more in taxes, I admit it, okay? So let's say you pay $1,200, $2,000 more in taxes for comprehensive health care, but you're not paying $12,000 in premiums, co-payments, and out-of-pocket expenses. Who has the better deal?
Well, that may be true for the $12,000 a year person. For the $30,000 or $40,000 a year per person who likes the health plan they have from their employer, there's 100. Hold on, there's 100. Yeah.
Look, you're a small business person. You're a decent person. You got 10 people working for you, right? You want to provide health care. It is enormously expensive.
It is.
All right?
Absolutely, that's true.
So every other country has said, you know what, you're a small businessman. Do your damn business. Don't worry about health care. We will cover all health care for you as a human right. So I think, I just want to end on this note, and the coronavirus makes this point. We lose conservatively, guys, about 30,000 people every year. That's conservative, who die because they don't get to a doctor when they should. That's a tragedy. But you can see the absurdity of the current system today when people cannot afford to go to the doctor who may be struggling with the coronavirus. I don't know how you can, anybody can defend a system where we're spending twice as much per person, and yet you got 87 million uninsured or underinsured. It is an indefensible system unless we worry about the healthcare industry, which made $100 billion in profits last year.
Senator, we gave you the time, and we want to give more. Many more questions to come, including the Green New Deal and socialism.
Hi, Nina.
Hi, Senator Sanders. Some of Joe Biden's answers don't make sense. Do you think it's acceptable for a presidential candidate to respond to questions like Joe Biden does?
I don't know how you say anything other than, minimal discussion in 7 minutes. So all that I have always believed is that if we believe in democracy, a candidate has got to be honest with the people about what he or she believes, given the many, many challenges facing our country. And when you do that, when you're honest and you look at the hard issues, so you're going to take on the fossil fuel industry or Wall Street or the drug companies, it brings forth opposition. But all I would say is, I'm not going to criticize Joe, but to say that I think the American people in this incredibly complicated and difficult moment in our history are entitled to thoughtful answers to the crises we face.
You just said that 2 minutes ago. Are you forgetting what you said 2 minutes ago? Are you forgetting already what you said just 2 minutes ago?
I think that Castro has some really legitimate concerns about, can he be someone in a long, grueling campaign that can get the ball over the line, and he has every right to call that out. There are definitely moments where you listen to Joe Biden and you just wonder.
Are we afraid to say that a lot of his sentences don't make sense, that he's having trouble completing thoughts?
Senator, your thoughts?
Joe voted for the war in Iraq. I led the opposition against the war. Joe voted for the Wall Street bailout. I voted against it. Joe has been on the floor of the House over the years talking about the need to cut Social Security, veterans programs, other programs. I have led the opposition to those cuts. Joe's views on women's issues. Joe has supported the Hyde Amendment, which would deny low-income women to use Medicaid funds for their own reproductive needs. I strongly disagree with that approach.
Are you suggesting that he lacks substance?
No, I didn't. Well, I'm just saying, look, I'm here, we're talking about real issues.
Right.
All right, and we can go on for 3 hours
Asking what
talking
you meant
about
by
him.
that.
If I'm going to give a speech to people, and that was at a rally or event that he held, I can't do it in 7 minutes. So all that I'm saying, Martha, is that I think as a candidate for president, you owe respect to the people, and you have to have the courage or the desire to say, hey, this is where I'm coming from. This is my view. You disagree with me? Fine. But I can't do that in 7 minutes of a speech.
Hi, Senator. As someone from Russia, a country that was greatly impacted by the negative effects of socialism, what assurances can you offer myself and other people impacted by socialism that democratic socialism will not have the same results?
Good. Thank you for the question, Martha. Martha? Margaret. Okay. What happened and existed in the Soviet Union was not socialism. It was authoritarian communism. So when we talk about democratic socialism, Margaret, I'm talking about Finland, I'm talking about Denmark, I'm talking about Sweden, I'm talking about countries all over the world who have used their government to try to improve life for working families, not just the people on top.
Do you regret at all saying what you said at that time in this race?
No. So if in China they've reduced extreme poverty, does that make me a communist who supports China? No, I'm just telling you a simple fact.
About the Kremlin in the 80s and suggesting that they used you, there's a picture from the piece, for propaganda purposes. Here's a quote from the piece. The documents show the Soviets' intensive preparation to use Mr. Sanders' interest in their country to their advantage. What do you say about that?
I say that the New York Times got it very, very wrong. Do you know who was advocating in a very strong way the establishment of sister city programs all over America? A communist named Ronald Reagan. And by the way, that sister city program today is still in existence 35 years later. It means that doctors from Russia have come over to the United States. I think the hockey team came over. There have been student exchanges. So let me be very clear. I think that was a great idea. And I want to see more. Rather than spending money, billions of dollars on the military, I want kids from all over the world to visit the United States.
You don't think they were, sort of using your interest in their country in any way to sort of find an in any way?
Martha, at that point, and I think the Times article makes that point on paragraph 203, there were, I think, dozens of sister city programs with the Soviet Union.
Senator Sanders.
Good evening.
As a Palestinian American, I and many like myself would like to know what your plan is to bring a fair resolution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict.
The United States cannot continue to maintain a one-sided policy toward the Middle East. What we need, Israel needs absolutely to be guaranteed the right to live in peace and security. No question about that, and I will defend that right. But the Palestinian people need also to understand that the United States believes they have a right to live in dignity and with justice.
Hi, Senator Sanders.
Hey, Richard.
As a first-year college student here at the University of Michigan Dearborn, I understand attending university can be expensive. But at the same time, I understand that I'm making an investment in my future. What would you say to families who have worked hard to save up money so that their children can go to college with minimal debt, or to graduates that have worked hard after graduating to pay off their student loans? Would you consider these people in your plan to cancel all student loan debt for public universities?
I don't think it's a radical idea to say that when we talk about public education, it shouldn't just be from first grade to 12th grade. It should be through college or trade school as well. That's why I believe we should make public colleges and universities tuition-free. And it's why I also believe that through a modest tax on Wall Street speculation, we should cancel all student debt in this country.
Who would be on your list?
You looking for a job?
Sure.
It's a little bit premature. I haven't won the nomination yet. But I think my gut feeling is that it must be a woman. I would look to women first. But they would be women, by the way, who hold my political views.
So one of those is Elizabeth Warren. You said it would be nice to have Elizabeth Warren's support. But have you asked for it?
have I asked for it. Elizabeth and I talk. We have talked for 20 years. We talk on a regular basis.
So
How's
have
that
you
for a
asked her?
political
Yes,
answer?
okay.
The question is, who is your closest friend in Washington?
My wife.
That's a good answer. I like that answer.
If you don't get the nomination, will you feel any responsibility for taking a job away from Larry David?
You know, I saw David. He was moaning and groaning, and I say, hey, look, I'm going to give you a good job for the next 4 years. You're going to make a fortune. What are you complaining about?